Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Vera Anandya Putri. I'm from group 1 and today we will discuss about language, dialect and varieties. And in here I want to explain about language. Okay, in here I will try to explain about language. What is the meaning of language? Language is many things. It can be a system of communication, a medium for thought, or vehicle for literary expression, a matter for political controversy, and a catalyst for nation building. The existence of language can be separated from human life. It can be seen from the fact that all activities related to interaction among people necessitate a language, and language is an important means of communication. And language reflects thinking. Obviously, we can't say a sentence until we have first thought of it. Often our thinking gets mixed with emotions and our reasons become loaded with desires, wishes, prejudices, and opinions. And the kind of thinking we do is our business until we try to persuade someone else to agree to our point of view. Then, that thinking becomes another's business. I will explain about language and dialect. Hudson 1996, page 22 defines a variety of language as a set of linguistic items with similar distribution, a definition that allows us to say that all of the following are varieties: Canadian English, London English, the English of football commentaries, and so on. According to Hudson, this definition also allows us to treat all the language of some multilingual speaker or community as a single variety, since all the linguistic items concerned have a similar social distribution. And a variety can therefore be something greater than a single language as well as something less even than something traditionally referred to as a dialect. Language can be at variance in lexical, grammatical, phonological, and other ways depends on different social, geographical, and other circumstances determine what elements will be needed and therefore developed, and for that reason sociolinguistics believe that such unique sets of items or patterns do exist. Most speakers can give a name to whatever it is they speak. On occasion, some of these names may appear to be strange to those who take a scientific interest in languages. But we should remember that human naming practices often have a large unscientific component to them, and census takes in India find themselves confronted with a wide array of language names when they ask people what language they speak. Names are not only ascribed by region, which is what we might expect, but sometimes also by caste, religion, village, and so on. And moreover, they can change from census to census as the political and social climate of the country change. While people do usually know what language they speak, and they may not always lay claim to be fully qualified speakers of that language, they may experience difficulty in deciding whether what they speak should be called a language proper or merely a dialect of some language. And such indecision is not surprising. Exactly, how do you decide what is a language and what is a dialect of a language? And what 28 languages, dialects, and varieties criteria can you possibly use to determine that? Whereas variety X is a language, variety Y is only a dialect of a language. What are the essential differences between a language and a dialogue. However, 1966 has pointed out that language and dialect are ambiguous terms. Ordinary people use these terms quite freely in speech. For them, a dialect is almost certainly no more than a local, non-prestigious, therefore powerless variety of a real language. In contrast, scholars often experience considerable difficulty in deciding whether one term should be used rather than the other in certain situations. As Huygens says, the terms represent in a simple dichotomy in a situation that is almost infinitely complex. He points out that the conclusion goes back to the ancient Greeks. The Greek language that we associate with ancient Greece was actually a group of distinct local varieties, Ionic, Doric, and Attic, descended by divergence from a common spoken source, with each variety having its own literary traditions and uses, e.g. Ionic for history, Doric for choral and lyric works, and Attic for tragedy. Later, Athenian Greek, the Koine or common language, became the norm for the spoken language as the various spoken varieties converged on the dialect of the major cultural and administrative center. Huygens points out page 923 that the Greek situation has provided the model for all later usage of the two terms with the resulting ambiguity. Language can be used to refer either to a single linguistic norm or to a group of related norms, and dialect to refer to one of the norms. The situation is further confused by the distinction the French make between a dialect and an patois. The former is a regional variety of a language that has an associated literary tradition, whereas the latter is a regional variety that lacks such a literary tradition. Therefore, a patois tends to be used pejoratively. It is regarded as something less than a dialect because of its lack of an associated literature. Even language like Britain, a Celtic language still spoken in parts of Brittany, is called patois because of its lack of a strong literary tradition and the fact that it is not some countries' language. And however, a dialect Dialect in French, like dialect in German, cannot be used in connection with the standard language, and no speaker of French considers standard French to be a dialect of French. In contrast, it is not uncommon to find reference to standard English being a dialect, admittedly a very important one of English. And Huygens points out that while speakers of English have never seriously adopted patois as a term to be used in the description of language, and they have tried to employ both language and dialect in a number of conflicting senses, and dialect is used both for local varieties of English and Yorkshire dialect and for various types of informal, lower class or rural speech, and in general usage it therefore remains quite undefined whether such dialects are part of the language or not. And in fact, the dialect is often thought of as standing outside the language. As a social norm, then, a dialect is a language that is excluded from polite society. Page 924, it is often equivalent to non-standard or even substandard when Such terms are applied to language and can connote various degrees of inferiority, with that connotation of inferiority carried over to those who speak a dialect. One such attempt, Saepul, has listed 7 criteria that may be usable in discussing different kinds of languages. According to Bell, these criteria: standardization, vitality, historicity, autonomy, rejection, mixture, and vector norms may be used to distinguish certain languages from others, and they also make it possible to speak of some languages as being more developed in certain ways than others, and thus addressing a key issue in the language dialect distinction. Since speakers usually feel that languages are generally better than dialects in some sense. And the first, standardization, refers to the process by which a language has been codified in some way. And the second is fidelity. Fidelity refers to the existence of a living community of speakers. And the third is historicity. Historicity refers to that a particular group of people finds a sense of identity through using a particular language. It belongs to them. And therefore, autonomy. Autonomy is an interesting concept because it is really one of feeling. A language must be felt by its speakers to be different from other languages. And the fifth, rejection. Rejection refers to the fact that a particular variety may be regarded as a sub-variety rather than as an independent entity. Next, 6. Mixture refers to feelings speakers have about the purity of the variety they speak, and the last, de facto norms, refers to the feeling that many speakers have that there are both good speakers and poor speakers, and that the good speakers represent the norms of proper usage.
Okay, everyone. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, good night, everyone. Welcome to Rifli's channel. Okay, so in this video, I want to tell about sociolinguistics, especially for dialects. In chapter 1, language, dialects, and variety, but I want to tell you specifically only dialects. Okay, so let's check this out. Okay, the dialect is like in my opinion, is like cultural tone. If we speak to other people, you can feel the tone. If people speak to you, you can feel the intonation, cultural intonation, if people speak with you. Okay, so in fact, dialect is often thought of as standing outside the language because dialect is a cultural tone, which means that when someone speaks, there must be culture. Okay, so you can also meet with people to speak with the dialects. Okay, so English language is the from old century to modern century. English is the polite language in England, but America modify the English language. So in British language, British English, especially, it means decrease to people to study. And then American language is a general language people study in school, in university, and also in course. I mean in bahasa is bimbel. I think course. Okay, so uh okay, the dialects divided into two. So the first is regional dialects, and the second one is social dialects. So I want to tell about dialect. Uh, I mean to tell dialect regional first. Regional variation in the way in a language is spoken is likely to provide one of the easiest ways of observing variety in a language. As you travel throughout a wide geographical area in which a language is spoken, and particularly if that language has been spoken in that area for many hundreds of years, you are almost certain to notice differences in pronunciation, in the choices and forms of words, and in syntax. There may even be very distinctive local colorings in the language which you notice as you move from one location to another. Such distinctive varieties are usually called regional dialects of the language. The term dialect is sometimes used only if there is a strong tradition of writing in the local variety. Okay, if you visit some countries in English, especially in British, in Canada, and in America, you can also see the different dialects with if people they speak English, but I don't know the dialects of the Canadian English, but I know the British English. The British English also politely language, uh, just like in vocabulary first. Pronunciation, noit. Noit is the British language dialects, and in American is night. Good night. Okay, so that's the difference. And then if you meet with people, you must adaptation with people who speak to you in English, especially in dialects American, in dialects British, because I think if people speak in dialects in different dialects, I mean, uh, so this is different because of the temperament. You, if you visit our country's English, especially, you must adaptation with the dialects and uh, and the language. Okay, in dialects, we can know two terms. The first is dialect and patois. The dialect, the dialect is used. I mean varieties in town, and also varieties in town uh, usually a root language, and patois is the dialect or varieties in village. and also known as usually in Patrice is polite language in village. Okay, so we can next to the okay. In regional dialect, we can also know a dialect geography. Dialect geography is to describe how people pronounce the words, pronounce somethings onwards. For example, lift, lift in British English, and elevator. Elevator is American English, and also in Indonesia, lift. We can also know as lift, and then you can also comment on the comment below to how vocabulary is something people pronounce in British in America, so that's different to express something. Uh, okay, okay, so let's go to the social dialects. Social dialects. Social dialects is like speaking style with if we interaction with other people's like friends and teacher, how to communicate with teacher, doctor, soldier, and then police. So this is the formal language. I mean, in social dialects, you can also you must know how formal language and how you can use informal language with friends. Okay, with friends, we often use the informal language, and then with teachers and with police, with doctor, you can also use a formal language. Okay, so okay, so that's enough for my explanation. So this is the 10 minutes, and thank you for watching this video. I mean, so let's to the next section with Siti Ahdiah. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'm sorry for my mistakes. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Ahdiah. I will continue the explanation from Andi. The topic is about style, register, and belief. So, what is style? Style is variation in a person's speech or writing. So, it's not only in the writing context, but in the speech or in the speaking context too. It is how individuals choose to express oneself, and also how people switch from one style to another style according to the situation or context you are in, the persons being addressed, and the topic discussed. If you are talking to someone who is older or maybe someone who has a higher position than yourself, you will naturally speak formally. It is also depends on what kind of situation you are in, such as when you talk to your best friends. It is certainly different when you speak in front of a crowd to make a religious speech.
Double found evidence in his sociolinguistic interview conducted in New York City about the forms of the type being used at certain point when a person was interrupted or offered a cup of coffee or become excited about a story. He will elicits more formal use by asking the subject to read a passage or a list of words. For more casual speech, he asks for emotionally significant story, which gave him 3 or 4 levels in possibility of company change. Levels some of his ideas about principle of styles. There are no single style speaker. Style shifting occurs in all speakers to a different degree. Interlocutors regularly and consistently change their linguistic forms according to the context. Styles can be ranged along a single dimension, measured by the amounts of attention paid to speech. Style shifting correlates strongly with the amount of attention paid to speech. Although every human being doesn't only have one style of speech, levels say that the vernacular is an original style of speech, learned at a very young age, on which more complex styles build later in life. This basic style has the least variations and provide the most general accounts of the style of a given group. So now I will give you the example of style shifting. Hello, what's a good word? This word is usually used for your friends. We will unconsciously speak informally in order to feel more comfortable. Meanwhile, good morning, sir. How are you? It is used in a more formal form because we are talking to a person of rank as well as an older age. Okay, now we move to the next topic, register. Register are sets of language items associated with discrete, occupational, or social groups. Surgeons, airplane pilots, bank managers, sales clerks, and pimps have different register. As Ferguson says, people participating in recurrent communication situations tend to develop similar vocabularies, similar features of intonations, and little bit characteristic of phonology that they use in this situation. This kind of variety is a register. Register is widely used in linguistics to refer to varieties according to use, in contrast to dialect defines as varieties according to user. We can say that saying jargon is an alternative term for register that is sometimes used for this kind of language. Special term for recurrent objects and events and formulaic sequences of routines seems to facilitate speedy communications. Other feature apparently serves to make the register establish feeling of rapport in serves other purposes similar to the a combination that influences dialects formations. There is no syntax taking the strong tendency for individuals and communicators to develop register variations along many dimensions. Of course, one person may control a variety of register. You came to be a stockbroker and an archaeologist or a mountain climber and etc. Its registers help you to express your identity at a specific time or place. Example, how you seek to present yourself to dialects, style, and register differences are leisurely independent. You can talk casually about mountain climbing in a local variety of a language. There are factors affecting register use. The first one is whether written or spoken as informal or formal. The second is literal variety and colloquial variety. And the third is kind of subject matter, cycle, setting, and occasions of language activity. And the functions of register is there is a strong tendency among individuals and co-communicators to develop register variations along many dimensions. One person can control a variety of registers, and each register helps one express his identity at specific time and place. You may be judged to speak better or worse than another speaker who have the same background as you. There seems to be some subtle bias into the way people tend to judge dialect. Sometimes not always people tend to exhibit preference for rural dialect over urban dialects. Sometimes the notion of better and worse solidifies into those of correctness and incorrectness. Okay, now we move to the next discussions. It's about belief. Belief is system of ideas or ideology. Some people believe that certain language is lack of grammar. We can speak English with the action, that French is more logical than English, that parents teach their children to speak, that primitive language exists, that English is degenerating and language standards are slipping, that pronunciation should be based on spelling, and so on. Many experts say that many beliefs about language are wrong, and that what has been taught about language has been wrong as well. This belief is seen in language attitudes and language behavior. There are many varieties of languages, and each language exists a number of cases. However, languages do not vary in every possible way. Then, how to classify someone from a certain place, a member of a certain social class, a representative of a specific professions, a social climber, and so on. One way to do this is to see relatively few cues. For example, the presence or absence of certain linguistic features. If you must learn to use both linguistic feature X, for the example, ings ending on verbs, such as sleeping, walking, reading, writing, and so on, and linguistic feature Y, for the example, in endings on verbs, such as walking, reading, and so on, and how to use them in different professions in situations A, B, C, and so on. What does that tell us about innate human abilities and the human capacity for learning? No, that's not. Each of us may have productive control over only a very few varieties of a language. We can usually comprehend many more varieties and relate all of these to the concept of a single language. That is, our respective linguistic ability is much greater than our productive linguistic ability. So I think this is enough for me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.